Good day, everyone. Welcome to the 53rd annual meeting of the Asia Development Bank seminar on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by strengthening domestic resource mobilization and international tax cooperation. We are all gathered here today, virtually, to discuss an important topic. How can ADB's developing members meet their Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic? The Asia-Pacific region faces structural challenges in implementing the SDGs, but one thing is clear: it is crucial for developing members to mobilise substantial additional revenue. Before I introduce you to our esteemed panellists, I'd like to remind you that the session today is being recorded and it will be available after this for others to watch. I'd also like to just introduce myself. My name's Naomi Ferguson. I'm the Commissioner of Inland Revenue in New Zealand. This is a role I've held for around 8 years, and I've got over 30 years experience in tax. And one of the things that I think I really value is the opportunity to engage with others across other jurisdictions, such as ADB members, through the ADB, OECD, and other organisations, to learn from each other about what we can do to make sure that our tax authorities are operating well. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panellists. I'm looking forward to our discussion with Mr. Masatsugu Asakawa, the President of the Asia Development Bank and the Chairperson of ADB's Board of Directors. He has a professional career that spans nearly 4 decades in diverse fields such as international finance, development and taxation at the Ministry of Finance and international organisations, including the OECD and IMF. Also joining us is Mr. Vitor Gaspar, Director of the Fiscal Affairs Department at the IMF. Mr. Director Vitor was Minister of State and Finance in Portugal from 2011 to 2013, and he has also held various positions in European and Portuguese institutions. Our third panellist is Ms. Emiliana Indrawati, Vice Chair of the Board of Governors and the Governor for the Republic of Indonesia, ADB, and Minister of Finance in Indonesia. Minister Sri Mulyani served as the Minister of Finance of Indonesia from 2005 to 2010, and again from 2016 onwards. She was the Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer of the World Bank from June 2010 to 2016. And Mr. Pascal Santamain, Director of the Centre for Tax Policy, Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. Director Pascal joined the OECD in 2007 as the Head of International Cooperation and Tax Competition Division in the Centre for Tax Policy and Administration, until he was appointed Director in 2012. He has also held various positions in the French Ministry for Finance. Before we start our panel discussion, Mr. Taro Aso, Governor for Japan ADB, and Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, and Minister of State for Financial Services in Japan, has graciously recorded a video message for us to kick off this seminar. Mr. Aso has previously served as Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Internal Affairs and Communications, and Minister of State, Economic and Fiscal Policy of Japan. So we'll hand over to Mr. Aso to get us kicked off properly.
President Asakawa, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to make opening remarks on this important session on the tax and development. Japan fully supports President Asakawa's vision and action plan toward enhancing the domestic resource mobilization, so-called DRM, and international tax cooperation, ITC, in the Asia and Pacific region. The importance of DRM can't be stressed enough to achieve the sustainable development goals and to build the foundation for further prosperity in the future. While the Asia-Pacific has been the most dynamic region, we still see the vast investment needs to fully capitalize the potential of our region, from roads, ways, to hospitals and schools, and so on. At the same time, we are also facing the emerging challenges such as the population aging, the climate change, and most recently, COVID-19 pandemic, and the government around the world have to decisively respond to them. The issue is how to mobilize a substantial revenue to finance investment and address the challenges in a sustainable manner. History tells us that the over-reliance on external debt should be avoided. We need to put more focus on raising the domestic tax revenue. Given the low side of tax revenue to GDP ratios in the Asia-Pacific region, many countries have sufficient room for mobilizing additional domestic revenues. Having served as the finance minister for nearly 8 years, I fully understand that raising tax revenue is easy to say, but much harder to do. In order to secure the untapped tax revenue, we need to expand tax base, enhance the efficiency of tax administration, and improve tax compliance of taxpayers. In addition, we also need to modernize our tax system and administrations to catch up with the rapidly changing social environment, including the digitalization of the society. Many developing countries in the Asia-Pacific have participated in the global tax administration effort, such as the exchange of the information on tax matters and the BEPS project. But implementation is still a big challenge for many countries. This is a fact. Against such a background, institutional and capacity building is essential to realize the DRM in the Asia-Pacific. I commend the ADB's focus on DRM in this region. I think the ADB has 3 leverages. First, the ADB has accumulated the successful track record on the development project with the member countries for more than half a century. I believe the ADB is good at listening to member countries' voices like a trusted family doctor. Second, the ADB has built a strong relationship with development partners, namely the IMF, the World Bank, and the OECD. The ADB is also collaborating with regional tax communities such as Sugata and Pira. The ADB has a very important role to play for establishing the regional hub as an open platform for capacity development and collaboration. Third, the ADB can leverage the President Asakawa's leadership. President Asakawa is the man who took leadership in initiating the BEPS project and delivered the splendid outcome, I think. The Asia-Pacific region stands now at a critical juncture to overcome the impact of COVID-19 pandemic and address the DRM challenge at the same time. To tackle these difficult challenges, I think Asakawa is the best on this globe. I mean, expecting that his new challenge will bear fruit in the Asia-Pacific region in the near future. Finally, I can assure that Japan will continue to champion for collective effort to enhance DRM and ITC in developing countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Aso. I know how busy finance ministers are at the moment, and so it was excellent that you were able to show your support for this work through taking the time to make that welcome video for us. I think some of the things that I took away from that were firstly the importance of this work, of mobilising in a sustainable way to make sure that the tax systems across our region are modernised and are able to support our government's needs, our communities' needs, particularly in the light of the pandemic. I loved your analogy of the ADB being our family doctor, and I think it does, again, create that sense of how well we can work together to learn from each other and to help each other build the capability that is needed across our region. Mr. Aso also talked about the importance of the relationship that ADB has with many of our partners. And so I would like to turn to one of our development partners and invite Director Pascal from the OECD to kick off our panel discussion from the perspective of the OECD. Welcome, Pascal.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Naomi, and extremely pleased and honored to be with you today, even though not in person, and I regret it sorely. I think this issue of domestic resource mobilization is really based on the consensus of the whole international community. And I think we would all recognize that tax is absolutely key, it's core to domestic resource mobilization. And we need to keep in mind that developing countries have a tax on GDP ratio, which is still too low. We are around 17.5% in general for developing countries, and most of the members of ADB are around that range, which is nearly half of the OECD average. So there is a need for domestic resource mobilization to sustain development. All that takes place in a context, and Aso-san, who has just been renewed finance minister in Japan, has said it, in a context where the international tax dimension is extremely important and where significant progress has been made on that front. And I would like to say hello and to thank President Masatsugu Asakawa for the role he played at the OECD to promote the work that Aso-san referred to fight base erosion and profit shifting. I could also mention the work we did to improve transparency with automatic exchange of information, which now occurs among many of ADB members. Finally, the international tax world has changed because now it's much more inclusive. Not only developing countries have to benefit from technical assistance and to enhance domestic resource mobilization, but they are also now part of the standard setting, of the definition of the rules, of the peer review of the implementation of the international tax rules. Most of ADB members, if not all, are members of the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, which includes 167 members, or the Inclusive Framework for BEPS implementation. In that context, capacity building, I think, is an extremely important activity, which is carried out by many international organizations. We have Victor Gaspar today in the panel from the IMF, the World Bank, the UN are all involved, the OECD too, through the Global Forum and the Inclusive Framework. And this is not limited to BEPS or exchange of information. It's about tax administrations, it's about VAT, it's about our initiative, Tax Inspectors Without Borders, together with the UN. So we can see that there is a lot of activity. And I would say all that is all the more necessary as COVID has hit the world badly and Asia as well. So domestic resource mobilization in a sustainable way, as you said, Naomi, is very important. And in that context, I would like to say that I very much welcome the initiative by the ADB, and thanks again to Masa Asakawa for making sure that Asia could be a core player in that game, and the ADB can indeed be the family doctor, as you say, or the place where we could facilitate, the hub where we could facilitate the delivery of the technical assistance for domestic resource mobilization. And the partners of the Platform for Collaboration on Tax, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, ourselves at the OECD are extremely happy to participate to that. And so am I to be with you this morning.
Kia ora, thank you, Pascal. It is fantastic to hear your support for the work that we are talking about today and your confirmation that the OECD is extremely happy to be a partner here. I think you stressed again the criticality of tax in domestic resource mobilization and the data points that you highlighted showing where ADB members are sitting compared to that wider group of OECD members really does remind us about why this is so important. But again, I think the fact, as you said, that we have made such significant progress and through working together, being inclusive, does show that we actually can find a path that will continue to help us working together to collaborate and support ADB members with this important work. With that, Pascal, thank you for your intervention. We will come back to you later, but I would like to now pass to Director Vitor and ask you, Director, when compared with other regions, what are some of the fundamental structural issues that have to be addressed to strengthen DRM across Asia Pacific? And what do you consider to be effective strategies to overcome these structural issues?
Thank you so much for your insightful question, but allow me to start by thanking President Asakawa and the Asian Development Bank for inviting me to participate in this high-level panel. I will start answering your question with an important empirical observation. Countries tend to have lower tax capacity at lower levels of income, both across countries and over time. On the left-hand side of the slide, we plot the tax to GDP ratio against income levels for all countries. We exclude only oil exporters. The difference in tax revenues between the first and the last decile is about 17 percentage points of GDP. The tax to GDP clearly increases with GDP per capita, and that's a remark that Pascal has already made. I would stress that tax capacity is a necessary enabler of state capacity. The latter, in turn, is necessary for the state to be able to fulfill its role in growth and development. That also applies in the region, so tax capacity is an important priority in the ADB region of operation. The Asia-Pacific region has been a beacon of growth and development in past decades. Japan and Korea are admirable examples of success, fast-paced development. Overall, the region has consistently grown faster than the average of emerging markets and developing economies. Extreme poverty has also fallen faster than elsewhere. Yet, the region is still confronted with large development gap. we estimate that countries in the ADB's region of operation would need an additional annual investment spending of about 9% of GDP in human and physical capital to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. And this calculation was carried out prior to the COVID crisis. The pandemic, as you know, is threatening to erase decades of progress, with worrying news of increased extreme poverty and malnutrition, especially in South Asia. There is indeed urgency in resource mobilization. Weak tax capacity in lower income countries in the region and elsewhere usually reflects an obsolete tax structure, limited administrative capacity, and in order to overcome these structural blockages, we need a committed multi-year strategy. For countries determined to improve their tax capacity in an enduring way, the platform for collaboration on tax that Pascal has already referred to has put forward the concept of a medium-term revenue strategy, MTRS. We at the IMF are enthusiastic, even passionate about the MTRS. We believe that it has the potential to help overcome the difficulties that broad tax reform is always associated with. I will be happy to elaborate later if I have the chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vitor, Director Vitor. I am sure that you will indeed have a chance to add more to the discussion. I love that IMF is passionate about the medium-term revenue strategy. And I think, as you commented there on those challenges, the obsolete tax structures, the limited tax administration capability, you're absolutely right to highlight that this needs to be a sustained multi-year strategy that we commit to. And I think your data points again, the 9% investment needed, and worryingly that being the figure before COVID-19, again, just strengthens the fact that we do need to work together on that medium-term revenue strategy in a way that allows us to continue some of the growth that we have seen. And we do know that we can be successful with this. So I think we should remind ourselves of those successes of the past decades, albeit they've been challenged by this year's pandemic. So thank you for your comments at the moment. We will indeed come back to you later in the discussion. I'd like to turn now, though, to another very busy person, Minister Sri Mulyani, and ask you if you would like to talk with us maybe about why you see strengthening DRM and ITC important for the ADB's developing members, and how can development partners best support their efforts on DRM and ITC, particularly given the additional challenges posed by COVID-19. Welcome, Minister Sri Mulyani. Minister, unfortunately, we can't hear you, or I can't hear you.
Thank you, Naomi. I'm sorry, it is still muted. For the ADB member, domestic resource mobilization is very important. As you see that the need to develop and how to actually acquire a resource for them to achieve development goal is still very, very high. And we cannot only rely on that, or in this case, support from multilateral or international aid. So domestic resource mobilization is built in and inherently important for the development process for many of the ADB member countries. This is also included Indonesia as a member country. Our low tax ratio, as well as the reform that we conducted, showing that we cannot do it alone. If we are going to do this reform, There are something that can be controlled by our own country in designing the reform, but certainly exchange of experience and knowledge, and also in this case, the practice of the policy is going to be very critical. Indonesia has already cooperated at the International Tax Cooperation so far conducted by the IMF, World Bank, or OECD. We also actively involved in base erosion profit shifting. We also assign signatory for the multilateral instrument of tax treaty, and all effort which we know that tax avoidance and tax evasion as well as base erosion is critical part for our effort to be combated, because Indonesia is an open economy and we also natural resource rich country. There are many of the cooperation of many companies is actually across border, and that opening to many of the tax avoidance, tax evasion. For us, of course, as a member of the ADB, the initiative by President Asakawa-san, which is very important, and I really welcome this initiative, is going to be an additional tools forum as well as for all of us to get a discussion, but also to get support on how we are going to push forward this international and regional cooperation on a taxation. For Indonesia also, as among the largest member of the ADB, we are going to also welcome this as really a very close cooperation. Taro Aso-san mentioned earlier as family doctors. I think these are going to be also a very convenient to discuss the taxation at the regional level. So we are not comparing to maybe many countries which is far away from Indonesia, but we can really compare with all countries close to us. So there is also creating a good political momentum for all of us, especially for Indonesian people and business community, that we are actually still far away and behind in increasing the revenue. I personally also see that many of the support that we receive, for example, from the IMF, World Bank, and OECD in designing the reform is really, really welcome. And so we are going to even more excited to see the ADB is going to also put this very important area and topic of development for many member countries of the ADB. The area that I expected to be discussed, not only in the form of tax evasion, tax avoidance, or base erosion, but we also need to concentrate on the country building. For example, like in Indonesia, we definitely have the compliance problem. We also have a problem with how we are going to expand taxes with the community industries, and we also need to also include the tax application. We are currently reforming our organization, improving the human capital or scale on the tax department, and we are investing in the database and the IT system. These are all the areas that we cannot do alone. So we need a lot of support and compare ourselves and benchmarking, which can only be provided very efficiently through multilateral institutions, whether this is ADB or other institutions like IMF and World Bank. So I welcome this initiative, and I really look forward to cooperate and join this kind of initiative by President Asakawa. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I really do appreciate just how busy, as I say, finance ministers are. And so it's fantastic to have your thoughts and to also hear just how much you want to ensure that Indonesia can work with ADB members in this area. I think your focus on what can we do practically, how can we learn from each other in a very real sense to deal with the issues, the cross-border issues, the issues of the region in terms of tax avoidance and evasion and BEPS, and also, as you say, simply in modern administration of a tax system. are certainly areas that I am passionate about, and it is great to hear you wanting to ensure that Indonesia can contribute and learn from others. And I do think it's one of the strengths of our Asia development members that we do both share and learn. And so I think it will be fantastic to hear more from Indonesia and more from yourself later in the panel. But many of you, in fact, I think all of our panel memberships have mentioned the importance and the value that ADB President Masa has brought to this work over many years. And so before we go further, I would like to turn to ADB President Masa to share your thoughts, please, on what our panelists have shared and to present ADB's vision and action plan on DRM and ITC.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. Governor Aso, thank you very much for introducing this very important topic and framing the course of our discussions, despite of your extremely busy schedule. Thank you, Minister Srimulyani. Yes, you are another very busy person. Mr. Pascal Santaman and Mr. Vito Gaspar for your insightful views and opinions. I also appreciate Ms. Naomi Ferguson for facilitating this panel discussion. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has brought to light serious vulnerabilities across Asia and the Pacific. Global poverty is increasing, public services are strained, especially in health and education. Economic growth is shrinking, and inequality is rising. ADB expects that the economies of 33 out of our 46 developed members will contract this year. Government face increased pressure on their budget and public debt due to an increase in large-scale expenditure programs or counter-cyclical economic stimulus packages and decrease in tax revenues. At the same time, they must secure additional financial resources to brace themselves for potential subsequent waves of the pandemic, while also getting their growth trajectory back on track to achieve the SDGs. Further investments in education, health, and combating climate change are much needed. This brings me to the subject that has brought us together today. I firmly believe that one of the keys to success in achieving the SDGs in the world reshaped by COVID-19 will lie in strengthening domestic resource mobilization, or DRM, and international tax cooperation, or ITC. Let me now describe some of the key challenges for domestic resource mobilization and tax cooperation in this region. First, even before the COVID-19 crisis, revenue generation efforts had not kept up with increased economic growth in most countries, like Pascal and Vito already mentioned. As the table shows here, tax yields across developing Asia are on average substantially lower than those across OECD countries, 17.6% compared to 24.9%, including revenue from Social Security. If you look at the average of countries in Southeast Asia, the tax to GDP ratio is even lower than 15%. 15% is a level that is now widely regarded as the minimum required for sustainable development. It should also be noted that the developing member continues to face rather volatile tax yields with large variability across time. Furthermore, as this slide shows, due to decrease in tax revenue and increase in expenditure after the pandemic, both public debt and fiscal balance worsened in many of our developing members, which makes it difficult to further increase their public debt. These figures remind us of the importance of broadening the tax base and enhancing tax compliance At the same time, we must also address the issue of DRM from a wider perspective. To start, tax policy must walk a fine line between raising tax revenues and promoting investments that can contribute to a robust recovery from the pandemic. To accomplish this, governments can adopt targeted policy instruments such as more tailored and cost-effective tax incentives. Second, let us leverage tax policy measures to recover economic growth so that it is on track to achieve SDGs. For example, governments can adopt a more progressive tax system to address the worsening income inequality due to COVID-19. Carbon tax or other environmental taxes can incentivize economic activities towards achieving green recovery, adaptation, and resilience. And third, let us strengthen our joint effort in protecting the tax base from base erosion and profit shifting, often referred to as BEPS. Through BEPS practices, some multinational corporations doing business in developing countries move taxable profits to lower or even zero-based tax jurisdictions. This challenge becomes more and more imminent given the digital transformation, which has accelerated due to COVID-19 mobility restrictions. Will continue to increase. BEPS is especially relevant issue for ADB's developing member countries in the region because their large markets and growing purchasing power will draw large investments from multinationals corporations, which makes the countries vulnerable to BEPS practice unless proper measures would be in place. Let me also offer a few words on tax evasion. Unlike BEPS, tax evasion is clearly illegal. Nonetheless, tax evasion is becoming more difficult for governments to identify and address because evasion can be facilitated by sophisticated technologies and increasingly interconnected global financial network. These developments demonstrates an urgent need for joint action to combat both BEPS and tax evasion practices. But cooperation in the Asia and Pacific region is lacking. Out of ADB's 46 developing members, 27 are not yet participating in the existing inclusive framework on BEPS. 19 are not yet members of the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes, and have therefore not committed to the automatic exchange of information, which is crucial to tackle tax evasion. Moreover, Asia and the Pacific is the only region that does not have a pan-regional tax association to exchange ideas and facilitate agreements on international and regional tax matters. Because taxation is traditionally seen as a uniquely sovereign matter, governments are often reluctant to have their hands tied, including by international agreements. But this is a false choice because stepping away from international tax cooperation for the sake of only protecting sovereignty will serve to erode sovereign powers by making BEPS and tax evasion easier. A failure to engage in international tax cooperation will also give rise to more unilateral tax measures, increasing the occurrence of double or even triple taxation. This will definitely undermine cross-border trade and investment. So, let me offer some proposals to address these challenges, which will assist countries as they rebuild their tax base for the future. First, I would like to call for the establishment of an effective regional hub on domestic resource mobilization and international tax cooperation in Asia and the Pacific. This hub will serve as an open platform where countries and development partners can collaborate closely to share experiences and practical knowledge and can coordinate on development support. Starting with high-level regional conference, we will seek to bring together practitioners from both tax policy and tax administration agencies. I believe policy and revenue administration bodies is needed to improve transparency and predictability of tax systems. This will contribute to creating an enabling environment for businesses and strengthening institutions for addressing BEPS and tax evasion. Second, under this hub, ADB would like to facilitate knowledge sharing between developing members on how to balance raising tax revenue and promoting economic activity, and how to adopt international standards on anti-BEPS practices and tax transparency. Third, ADB will mainstream DRM and ITC in our operation. We will proactively use our technical assistance and financial instruments, such as policy-based lending, PBL, to promote DRM and adoption of international tax standard. We will support the formulation of national action plans to set direction under a country-specific medium-term revenue strategy, which Vito mentioned, including a planning for eventual fiscal consolidation over the medium term. ADB can also help revenue agencies make stronger investments in technology for tax administration. Before I close, let me highlight the most critical key to success in DRM, that is, earning the trust of taxpayers. As many of you may remember, the OECD G20 BEPS initiative was ignited by public demand for equity and transparency in fiscal affairs after the global financial crisis in 2007 and 2008. The initiative resulted in a greater understanding and sense of purpose by governments to close tax loopholes and ensure a stronger commitment to tax payment by multinational businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout my career, I have witnessed firsthand the tremendous benefits of international tax cooperation initiatives. It is vital that we move forward together on these issues with a sense of urgency. Through our efforts in DRM and ITC, we can lay the foundation for a robust, resilient, and sustainable recovery from the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we will achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me stop here, and I'd be pleased to take up any further thoughts on the action plan or other issues you may wish to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, President Masa. You have given us much to discuss and importantly reminded us, I think, that key to all of our success is maintaining the trust and developing the trust of our taxpayers. I would like to come back to our panelists to ask you to give us your thoughts on the work that President Masa has just introduced to us on the ADB's vision and action plan on, and particularly on the establishment of the regional hub on DRM and ITC. Minister Sri Mulyani, could I ask you first perhaps to give us your reflections on President Masa's presentation?
Thank you. I think what President Asakawa has presented is very encouraging and positive initiative of domestic mobilization. As I also mentioned earlier, that the forum can really serve as a sharing experience and knowledge, which is very critical country, because each country usually is already have their own policy framework and reform, but in order for us to be able to know whether this reform moving forward and make a progress, then we need to have this experience exchange as well as knowledge exchange, practical knowledge exchange that could also serve additional momentum reform domestically. We also need to have this best practice and solution, which is really related to the fact that many of the country are actually facing almost a similar situation, whether this is related to the compliance, whether you are going to discuss about the administration capacity or dealing with the policy. Not to mention, as I mentioned also earlier, that when we are dealing with tax avoidance, tax evasion, then you are going to also deal not only in domestic issue, but how you are going to address the issue of the cross-border. So the issue here is how ADB can really strengthen the international cooperation, which is already become one of the menu, whether within OECD, IMF, and World Bank. The need of domestic resource mobilization is definitely very critical. As everybody mentioned, that with this COVID, the revenue has been dropped very significantly because of the business has to be halted in order for us to be able to contain this COVID. So for all countries post-COVID, definitely the area of revenue mobilization is going to be one of the most critical policy priority. So this is a very timely for ADB to establish this initiative at the regional level and tax cooperation. And we look forward to really work with Asakawa-san and all the colleagues in ADB. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Srimulyani. I think you have hit the nail on the head in saying that it is a very timely initiative to add to the way in which we can share our practical experience. Director Vitor, perhaps you would like to comment on how you think this will help us deal with some of those structural challenges that you talked of earlier.
Thank you, Naomi. Glad to. I very much welcome the creation of the regional hub, and I'm sure it will create new opportunities for cooperation and exchange among the ADB's membership, but also involving development partners. Masa, if you allow me, my dear friend, the hub is a regional continuation of your efforts to foster cooperation on tax that you have pursued in the past, focusing on the global level. I would also like very much to acknowledge your role in sustaining the platform for cooperation on tax that, as Pascal referred, involves the OECD, the World Bank, the United Nations, and also the IMF. The hub, in my view, is a very timely initiative. Many, you yourself, Masa, referred the impact of COVID-19 on revenues. Cooperation is furthermore a key ingredient in overcoming the pandemic, and this very much includes cooperation on tax. As you said, there is a increased salience of issues that have to do with justice in general in the context of the pandemic, and therefore the public tolerance to behavior of tax avoidance and tax evasion is much reduced. And so progress in tax cooperation will be decisive for this matter, but also to ensure tax and trade harmony going forward. I'm also pleased to see that the regional hub will help implementing tax reform roadmaps in the membership. This is very much aligned with the MTRS concept that I referred to. The MTRS precisely starts with the formulation of a high-level roadmap of tax system reform in a country extending for a period of between 4 to 6 years. The MTRS has 4 interdependent components, and those are the ones that you see in the slide. The first is, what is tax needed for? What spending is enabled by tax capacity? The second element is the tax reform roadmap itself, and we always emphasize that it's important to cover tax policy, revenue administration, but also the legal framework. The third element, and this is something that you yourself, Naomi, have stressed, there needs to be a sustained medium-term commitment to reform that should ideally reflect political consensus and a whole of government approach. And obviously, it is necessary to find an understanding and a trust-based relation with the taxpayers. And finally, last and least, the medium-term revenue strategy also allows for a coordination with development partners to avoid gaps and overlaps. So I think that the MTRS is important and is important in the ADB's region of operation, and we have almost half of the MTRS worldwide in the region, and countries are in various levels of preparation. And we are very happy and look forward to cooperating with the ADB and its membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Vitor. I think, again, the work that you are showing us that we can do to align the contribution that IMF can support us with through the MTRS, linking that with the reform roadmaps and use the hub to really make sure we do learn and share across our region is a really strong way forward for us to think together. I would, though, also just like to come back to Director Pascal, perhaps for your thoughts on the proposals that we are discussing today.
Thank you, Naomi. And I would just like to echo what Minister Srimulyani said, what Vitor has just said too, which is this initiative is both extremely important and extremely timely. And again, we would like to thank President Massa for having launched it. It's important for all the reasons we indicated for the role of domestic resource mobilization. And it's timely because of COVID, because it's overdue in this region. And I think that was said also by Massa earlier, that this region does not have a tax administration forum which is established to address this issue. We work with Segata, which is a great initiative, but there is a need for a true hub, which is exactly what ADB proposes. Now, the OECD has been for a long time active in the region, and we think that this could be used to feed the hub and to work closely with ADB members through the ADB. We do have multilateral centers in Korea, in China. We have organized several regional consultations when we developed BEPS with the support of Massa. We have a long-standing partnership with the ADB to keep revenue statistics, and we have 21 economies, members of ADB, which are in these revenue statistics. Even in this region, our initiative, Tax Inspectors Without Borders, is active. More than 55 million euros of additional taxes have been collected through some tax auditing in some of the members of ADB. And we have one senior advisor, Andrew Auerbach, now based in Jakarta and working closely with the government of Indonesia, but also more broadly with governments in the region. So many different work streams which could all feed this initiative. And of course, I will not go back to MTRS because Vitor was very eloquent on all the benefits resulting from the MTRS and the fact that the multidimensional approach through the MTRS would allow for, I think, enhanced capacity building in the region. So ADB as a regional hub is exactly what we need, and we at the OECD, working also with the IMF, the World Bank, the UN through the platform for collaboration on tax, in particular on the MTRS, but are fully available to provide our support, in particular where the OECD may have some value added on the exchange of information work. It's time for all countries in the region to benefit from the common reporting standard and therefore to build the capacities of tax administrations to protect the information, the confidentiality of the information, but more importantly then to use that information to make use that offshore assets of their residents are identified and can be taxed. I think Indonesia is a great example of what can be done with many information pieces on the bank accounts owned in countries in the region and elsewhere. BEPS is something that President Massa and myself are very much attached to. It's about making sure that multinational companies pay what they have to pay, that they stop abuses, and that tax administrations are equipped to fight tax avoidance. And there are other areas like tax administration. Vitor mentioned tax administration together with tax policy as core to the work we can do there. ADB can help strengthen tax administrations. We also have VAT. The IMF is the best provider of technical assistance on VAT. What we can supplement here is the work on ensuring that digital activities can be taxed at VAT, which is a very important source of revenue, probably even more so than the corporate income tax issue that we have. And finally, as I mentioned, the tax challenges of the digitalization of the economy, the ADB could also support the participation of its members into the work of the inclusive framework and of the Global Forum to participate to the elaboration of the standard. In a nutshell, this is a fantastic initiative that we have been looking for years, and I would like to thank wholeheartedly Massa for having launched that initiative. He can fully count on our support.
Thank you, Pascal. It is great to hear your passion for this initiative and your confirmation that the OECD can add value to it by sharing the assets and support that you provide to us all through this hub to the ADB members. I am conscious, though, that there are many other organisations that support us, and so I would just like to ask colleagues from the World Bank, the Pacific Islands Tax Administration Association, and then the Study Group on Asian Tax Administration and Research as key partners to share their views on the establishment of the regional hub on DRM and ITC. And perhaps I could start with World Bank Programme Manager, Chiara Bronchi. What are your thoughts, Chiara?
Thank you, Naomi. I would like to thank the ADB and the President Asakawa for inviting me to attend this high-level panel. We would definitely, the World Bank would like to congratulate President Massa for this initiative, and also for the ADB's action plan for fostering dialogue and collaboration on taxation in the region. We are extremely supportive and happy to see this establishment of a regional hub. We have been discussing for a while, and this was in the making, but thanks to President Massa, we see this now moving forward, and we are absolutely supportive, like others in the room. It is timely and essential to promoting domestic revenue mobilization and also international tax cooperation, and in particular now for achieving sustainable development goals. The World Bank has been engaging in Asia and the Pacific region closely, work together with partners and colleagues around the table, and particularly for targeting extreme poverty and promoting shared prosperity. And so we are very much looking forward to further our collaboration with all the partners and ADB on the tax agenda, and in particular to promote sustainable development. At present, as like other colleagues have indicated, we are faced with new challenges due to the COVID pandemic. And under these unprecedented circumstances, countries do face major social and economic challenges and have been impacted on the public finances greatly. Many of the countries also in the regions were not in a good position in terms of revenues, mobilization. And so now it becomes even more urgent and timely that we all get together and support the countries to overcome also this very difficult phase. On the fiscal side, the World Bank would also like to renew its commitment to continue to support fundamental tax reforms in Asia and the Pacific, and of course, in close collaboration with partners and the ADB. Vitor, Gaspar have mentioned the medium-term revenue strategy, which we also renew our commitment to it. It is a key element for our collaboration. It certainly is the element that will really help us to help our countries and our member countries. But we also see other strategic areas where we believe a stronger collaboration with ADB could be fruitful. VAT, I think Gaspar has mentioned it. And there are also a number of tax administration toolkits that have been developed with the IMF, with the OECD and the UN, like TADAT and also Diamond, that can definitely be jointly applied in the Asian Pacific member countries and done together. Recently, we have also launched the Prosperity Collaborative. This is a multi-stakeholder initiative, currently including the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Ernst & Young, the New American Boston Global Forum. So it's a combination of public sector and private sector participants, and it aims to assist governments in the digital transformation of their tax systems. We have received expression of interest in Asia, including Indonesia, and look forward to exploring collaboration with the ADB on this important initiative. In addition, we are now closely working together with ADB and other stakeholders for the Pacific members on international tax issues, and we're very much delighted to enhance this joint effort through the new hub. To conclude, we hope to see the opportunities for collaboration around the platform and the hub and growing and also in a timely manner. And we're also available to seal our collaboration with an agreed action plan and memorandum of understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. It's great to hear that you're willing to seal the deal with the action plan. And I think the Prosperity Collaborative sounds really fascinating. I might be looking for a little bit of info on that after the session as well. Perhaps I could turn now to the Pacific Islands Tax Administrations Association Head of Secretariat. Can I ask your view, Connie?
Bulavinak, Naomi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Let me at the outset acknowledge Asian Development Bank for its recent engagement with the Pacific Islands Tax Administrators Association, Secretariat, and recently launched Pacific Action Plan, which the PITA Secretariat and its members are in full support of. I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to highlight the Pacific region's challenges and opportunity to collaborate with ADB in strengthening Pacific Islands Tax Administration's efforts in mobilizing revenue. Domestic resource mobilization has been the focus of the PITA Secretariat in assisting our members. We do this in providing capacity building initiatives on core tax functions with the objective of improving and modernizing tax administrations in the region, managing the erosion of revenue base, and addressing international taxation issues. Similar tax organizations in other regions, such as STIAT in the Americas, ATAF in Africa, PITA has been around for the Pacific region, 16-member administration's successful efforts, and believing that more can be done in collaboration to assist the Pacific region. The global pandemic has severely affected the Pacific region, a region that heavily depends on tourism as its main source of revenue. Given this, revenue administrations in the region has shifted its focus to improving compliance, risk management, taxpayer services, and its information technology. Many administrations have also taken on government initiatives and responsibilities in response to COVID-19, which has placed great pressure on current limited resources. And while there are improvements in managing risk, tax administrations in the region are facing challenges on its tax system. IT systems that was problematic in the past have further deteriorated now given additional responsibilities taken on by tax administrations. Also at a time where tax office desperately needs reliable data and analysis for decision making. The PITA Secretariat welcomed the opportunity to join development partners and learn from experiences that we shared through the regional hub to help boost PITA members' tax collection, through broadening and protecting the tax base, improving tax, domestic tax compliance, support tax reforms, and improving tools and procedures to stem both cross-border and domestic tax evasion and tax avoidance. Technical assistance would be improving our legislations, our tax reforms, researches and policy, big data management capabilities, information technology systems, and operation. And since inception, PITA has worked closely with Pacific Financial Technical Assistance Center, which is part of IMF, in these areas with our members bilaterally and regionally. The regional hub will provide an additional means to continue coordinating the efforts and assistance provided in the region and bringing bespoke assistance that our members need. In addition, since the release of the EU list on non-cooperative jurisdiction on tax matters, the PITA Secretariat has continuously worked with listed countries and relevant development partners to coordinate a regional approach to enabling members to comply. A regional hub will enhance this regional approach and emulate exchanges to find adequate solutions. So far, our efforts have mostly been on regional capacity, building initiatives, namely partnership with ADB and OECD on the last mile seminar, which is effective EOIR from tax auditors' perspective in 2018. In 2019, our partnership with ADB, the OECD data, New Zealand IRD on tax avoidance and evasion, the continuous awareness of EOI and MAC AEOI to PITA members at our PITA heads meetings, a partnership with ADB on regional meeting on challenges and opportunities in implementing international tax standards in the Pacific in November of 2019. We believe the regional hub will help strengthening the strong relationship and partnership we have with development partners to help rationalize technical assistance we provide to our members through an enhanced coordination and our development partners. Finally, I would like to express PITA's full support to the Regional Hubs initiative. I would like to take note that the Pacific Action Plan focuses on enhancing tax transparency and the fight against tax avoidance and evasion. These are priorities for us, and a strong regional support is vital to ensure that our members participate fully in the international tax architecture. The creation of Regional Hub will facilitate the engagement of our members in the implementation of international tax standards. The enhanced capacity support in this area will significantly help provide our members with the tools to address challenges of tax evasion and avoidance. PITA Secretariat stands ready to work with ADB and other development partners to progress this initiative in the region. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Connie. Great to hear that you too feel that you can use the hub to progress those important priorities around capacity development across your members. Perhaps I could just turn now to Director General Suro Utumo, who's currently the Director General of the Study Group of Asia Tax Administration and Research. Can I ask just for your comments from the perspective of Sagata?
Thank you very much, Naomi. It's an honor for me to have an opportunity to respond to President Asakawa presentation on behalf of the Study Group on Asia Pacific Tax Administration and Research, SCATR, which currently represents 17 tax administration across Asia Pacific region. Through domestic resource mobilization, we seek to accelerate our economic growth by raising spending our domestic source fund for public goods and services, such as education, health, electricity, and also transportation. These public goods and services are vital to help people rise out of poverty. In addition, those are also essential to attract private investment and to lay the foundation for long-term economic growth and tax as one of the key elements of the DRM. The SCATR members have been undertaking tax reform with various objectives, depending on the needs of each member. However, we noticed that there are three common goals that all members have been trying to achieve from such reform, namely improving tax compliance level so as to increase tax revenue, which will eventually lead to a higher tax ratio. And the second was incorporating advancement in technology into tax administration so that both tax authorities and taxpayers may build their relationship in a more convenient way. And the third one is updating the tax system based on current tax issues for which we need to find a solution, including issues of digitalization. The second topic, international tax cooperation, will be an integral part of our effort in mobilizing our domestic resources. Such a cooperation may be embodied through dialogues, exchange ideas, and sharing experiences. Tax administration needs to build strong relations with fellow authorities to protect respective domestic revenue sources from base erosion and profit shifting, so as to preserve such sources, providing the people with what they need and it's the objective of DRM. As a group of tax administrations, the SCATR member accept the ADB invitation to the session with a view that the topics of DRM, in which taxation plays a crucial role, and international tax cooperation are very relevant and highly important to us. The two topics are getting more relevant as we are facing the COVID-19 pandemic. It has brought to us together to fight the pandemics to avoid the possibilities of financial instability and economic crisis. I'm glad to hear the 2020 SCATR Task Force has opened discussions with the ADB related to our capacity building program. SCATR will include all relevant aspects of DRM and international tax cooperation addressed by the ADB into the program, which has been held by virtual means to this current situation. Speaking of virtual means, all of our trainings may cover a wider range of participants when compared to those we had through face-to-face meeting in the past. At the end of my observation, I would like to say that considering the significant economic size of Asia Pacific in the role of the Secretariat has become more vital in the area of taxation. And our cooperation with the ADB will help both parties program furthermore. Thank you very much. Back to you, Naomi.
Thank you, Thuro. And I think that sense that the the hub will allow us to take our cooperation to a next level as we focus on tax cooperation and DRM and capacity building really came through. I'm going to go back to our good colleague, President Massa, who I think we see as a driving force here. And words that were repeated through everyone's comments there, President Massa, were that this was timely, that the need for it was urgent, that it would really support our collaboration and help us to practically provide action and exchange of ideas and knowledge that will allow all of us to deal with the challenges ahead. So I'd like to thank our speakers today for sharing their insights. But before I do that, can I ask you to just have the last word on their regional hub and what you've heard from our speakers? President Massa.
Yep. Thank you, Naomi. Yeah, thank you, Naomi. Thank you very much, everyone, for supporting the concept of a regional hub and for your insightful observations, which are very helpful to us. Let us continue our dialogue and further explore our collaboration areas that will strengthen the foundations for this regional hub. As my dear friend Vito mentioned, there already exists the platform for collaboration on tax, PCT, which is a development coordination, donor coordination forum comprising the IMF, OECD, the UN, and the World Bank. When I was still with the Japanese Ministry of Finance, I got deeply involved in the establishment of this PCT initiative. So I believe our proposed regional hub can work with and complement PCT to provide an open platform for all countries in Asia and the Pacific, as well as development partners. And also, Vito mentioned the MTRS, which is another excellent initiative ongoing, already existing by FAD or IMF. And I very much would like to seek for closer cooperation between this hub and that initiative as well, trying to integrate the beauty of that initiative into the operation of this hub. The last thing I'd like to see is, for both of us, provide kind of conflicting advice to the same countries. That should be, really avoided. To wrap up, let me touch on our next steps. The rest of this year and the first half of next year will focus on conducting needs assessments and mapping exercises at the ground level. Because the support of direct beneficiaries of the regional hub is essential, we will need solid political commitment from each of our developing members to enhance DRM and ITC. After completing these first steps, we intend to organize an international conference for the heads of tax policy and tax administration bodies, along with senior officials of development partners. This conference will provide a venue to engage in strategic dialogue with all our developing members and the relevant partners on the key action items for international tax, tax policy and administration, and other relevant policy matters. These activities will help to firm up support and ownership from developing members and international partners for the regional hub, which will strengthen the hub's impact on DRM and ITC for the future. Once we establish broad-based ownership on these issues, we will move on to initial implementation of this regional hub. As part of this effort, ADB would like to collaborate with developing members and developing partners from the second half of 2021 to 2022 on country-specific strategies to improve revenue mobilization. We will stand side by side with governments to help design and implement tax policies that are well balanced between revenue mobilization and promotion of economic activity. During this stage, we envision several pilot projects, including One, policy-based lending programs to promote reform in tax policy and administration. Two, project lending to help revenue agencies make stronger investment in technology. Three, joint capacity building and knowledge sharing project on DRM and ITC with other development partners. And four, technical assistance projects focusing on digital transformation of tax administration. After this initial implementation stage, we plan to expand the DRM and ITC interventions to other countries, building on the experiences and successes of the pilot project and other activities. So thank you for the opportunity to introduce ADB's vision and action plan to establish a regional hub for DRM and ITC. I very much look forward to working closely with you hand in hand to make this initiative a success for our region. Thank you. Back to you, Naomi.
Thank you, President Masa. It was great of you to set out those next steps for us as well. And I think from today, you will have sensed a real commitment from partners and ADB members to engage with those next steps and to take this concept and make it real for us all. I would like to thank all of our speakers today for sharing your insights and experiences with us. At the outset in his video, Mr. Aso talked of the ADB as the family doctor. I think what struck me through our discussions was how much of a family the international tax community is and how much we do want to support each other to be successful in our own areas, but also collectively. And it was great to have your insights to support that. Today's discussion will be summarised and shared with you shortly, and it will be available, as we said at the beginning, as a recording of this webinar to share with colleagues who are interested but were unable to join with us. Domestic resource mobilisation and international tax cooperation are indeed crucial to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and respond to the needs of developing members amidst the pandemic. Together we can make the Asia and Pacific areas prosperous, inclusive, resilient and sustainable. And it's been a real pleasure to moderate this seminar. Thank you all. I look forward to continuing to work with you, and I hope that we will all be able to join together at that international tax conference that President Masa was highlighting as a glint in his eye for the future, and hopefully we will be able to continue to collaborate, potentially in person, certainly virtually, between now and then. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day or night or morning, depending on where you are. Kia ora.